now.
Right, that's it. I'm going to go over here and have a turn. I'm going to have a funny turn.
Hey, where?
Whoops, there I go.
So, what are you talking about? I can't see nothing.
See you in the pub.
Stop with that then.
Night.
This is the BBC television service. And now another marvellous effort from the clock department leads us into one of the most popular programmes of the 1970s. As they used to say, let's go nationwide.
Nationwide, absolutely brilliant.
Honest to goodness, tabloid television.
It had the confidence to ignore the news, ignore current affairs if they were boring.
Nationwide made this country, Britain, an entity.
The first BBC programme I ever worked on that printed its own notepaper.
Damn sight more than skateboarding ducks, you know.
Nationwide ran for 14 years, from September 1969 to August 1983. In all, 3,131 editions of Tea Time Current Affairs. At its peak in the mid-70s, over 12 million people tuned in every evening for a unique mix of hard news stories,
sentences totaling 4,000 years to 35 IRA men and women,
investigative consumer journalism,
The Knockout will be on BBC1 at
a regional roundup.
tonight if you want to watch it. I'm sure many of you do. Let me know, very quickly go over to Bristol if I can. And Brian Roberts, I gather you have some news for us.
Yes, and some good news just
A nationwide speciality, the light-hearted item.
Throw your mind back to the merry month of July and ask yourselves how on earth these young maidens could have been responsible for a serious attempt to deal with a problem affecting half the men and women in Britain.
Tea's ready!
Minnie's dead, Minnie! Lord have mercy! You're the baddest thing around!
Mom, can you bring some much sauce, please? Get it yourself, you lazy so-and-so.
One of the things you wouldn't expect is two of Britain's brightest brains deserting the academic panoply of gown and lecture theatre for the sanctity of a TV set. But what is this TV programme that's ensnared the colossal minds of Dr. Charlotte Brunsden and Dr. David Morley? Believe it or believe it not, it's only too familiar.
It was a period when the real research on television current affairs was all on hard news stories. And one of the reasons that Nationwide was interesting is precisely because it didn't seem very interesting. It's precisely because it seemed to be about nothing.
Mrs. Glynn, when you bought this Puerto Rican packet, did you seriously think that you were buying instant sea pets?
It was, as I understand it, the most popular current affairs programme among all respondents in the BBC's own audience research. It was clearly a very important programme. And yet it seemed to be dealing with trivia.
Michael, do you always sing while you're working?
Fundamentally, there was a tremendous loyalty for the regional programmes. People all over the country were switching on to Look North, to Points West, to Scene Around 6, all those programmes. And then they were going away. And so we decided to try to latch on to that regional loyalty and developed the Nationwide style and theme as a consequence.
Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him.
When the poor have cried, Caesar hath wept. Ambition should be made of sterner stuff.
Yet Brutus says he was ambitious, and Brutus is an honourable man.
You all did see that on the Lupercal, I thrice presented him with a kingly crown. Okay?
Once Nationwide began to build a decent audience at tea time, and that put the spine on the whole of the BBC One audience right through the rest of the evening, it was virtually immovable. The BBC didn't know what it had given birth to, and I suspect if it had known, it probably wouldn't have done it. It was this popular appeal programme that had us sold.
Alex, can you talk to TK Supervisor, please?
On film, on air.
Nationwide was very plain speaking, and I think that what it encouraged in its viewing audience was a trust. They knew that at the end of every day they could turn it on, it would be there, it would be very familiar, very trustworthy. They would be told what was going on in the world in words of one syllable.
One of the things Nationwide represents is an attempt by the BBC to make ordinary television, popular television, but television which also involves people. So it's going to be news that isn't about other people, but in some curious way about the audience themselves. So that one was just sitting quietly in your living room. You'd just be sitting quietly in your living room, eating your tea, watching Nationwide, and then you suddenly find yourself asking questions to a member of state. You know, the Nationwide reporter would be saying, well, what we want to know, what the viewer at home wants to know.
So let's go straight to Vic Feather, who I know is going to be called in that film by somebody, Big Brother. Vic, this is a sample here in front of me in this tray of the kind of interest aroused in the country in you. And in Bangor, a Port Maddox schoolteacher, Mr. Jones. He wants to know, Mr. Feather, your arrogance and pomposity seem bent on bringing the government down. Should you not be helping this great country of ours in its economic plight instead of playing into the hands of communists?
Do you ask me to answer this?
I would ask you to.
I see.
In the 5 years that I was editor, the extraordinary thing is that more than 10,000 ordinary people appeared in the programme, giving their views on national issues, giving their views on local issues.
I'd like to ask Pam Bedard in Manchester, if she can hear us, to put her question to Vic Feather.
I'd like to ask why I should join the union.
Yes, what occupation is yours?
I'm a reporter.
A reporter? Well, first of all, I think that if you didn't join a union, you mightn't be a reporter very long, but that's quite apart.
It wasn't the BBC speaking, it was the BBC providing an opportunity for the nation to speak to itself. And that was the really important thing. No one got in the way.
It's often been said that Nationwide itself was a family, and so it really was. I hate to say it, but I've been called Dad sometimes, and I'm going to call Sue Lawley Mum. But anyway, we really were a together team, a family. And out there were families we were talking to. Granny watched, little Tommy watched when he came home from school. Mum watched while she was making the high tea or the dinner. And Dad, if he got home in time, he watched too. We embraced those families, and they in turn embraced us.
Gnome File, case history 68, and the home of Mrs. Harris. There are no secrets in her garden. Mrs. Harris is a proud gnome owner. They're on display for the outside world to see.
Nationwide really did speak to something about the way in which people understand themselves. They understand themselves often. The real me is not me at work, it's me at home doing what I want to do.
Mrs. Margaret Miller gets tea ready, keeping an eye on 2-year-old Vanessa. Graham, aged 8, and Tracy, 9, play quietly by themselves. While in the front room, textile worker Ron Miller and 6-year-old Gary are absorbed in a favourite programme. They watch on even though they know there's a snag. The wrong side's going to win again. Indians biting the dust. That's why Saturday mornings at Bankfield Terrace are different.
Like the Seminole, Navajo, Kickapoo, like those Indians, I'm an Indian too.
It's like all these attempts to try and have good news programmes. It's so unnewsworthy that the logic of it is that they're pushed towards the eccentric and the quirky.
was then no doubt that there were extraordinary, unusual, larger-than-life characters throughout the UK. And in the course of the history of Nationwide, a great many of them, if not all of them, appeared on the programme.
I think Nationwide was really a pioneer in kind of Britain as a theme park and a certain kind of heritage idea of what Britain was.
Frank, it's Dave Rowley on 3360.
There's Sark. Now, I know Sark's been done to death at the stories, but it's such a lovely place over there. And the thing is, they're getting this new dame, and he's a man.
Anyone who did a pompous job but was rash enough to allow themselves to have a weasel put down their trousers. So Vickers...
The minute you walked in the joint, I could see you were a gal of distinction, a real big spender.
The Reverend Andrew Dowell, a young curate from Manchester, is the owner of a most singular talent.
People who prided themselves in the number of raw eggs they could swallow.
And any sort of physical deformity. And brave troopers as well.
Oh! Yeah.
Nationwide was a Bible of cliché, you know, and basically in comedy what you're doing is taking cliché and pointing out that it is cliché. And I found it was a wonderful training ground for Not 9 O'Clock News, which is where I did afterwards.
Mr. Weemley, can you hear me?
Well, that's all we have time for now, because now we can go to Bristol for news of an earlier story. I believe that there in Bristol, you have news of a duck that does nothing.
No, we've got a pheasant that roller skates and a man who sits in trees and shits on passers-by.
I always wanted to bring out a range of cuddly toys, which were based on, you know, like the Cabbage Patch toys. And you had the Bob Wellings, and you had the Michael Barrett, and you had the Sue Lawler, and you could get a complete set. I always pictured people putting them on their pillows when they went down to, you know, if you went into people's bedrooms, there'd be 6 Nationwide reporters all nice and soft and cuddly on the top.
You weren't worth your salt if you're a Nationwide reporter, and there was a funny place to do a piece to camera, and you didn't do it there, so it was top of Tower Bridge, hanging off a bus.
Or, of course, in a jacuzzi.
Keep young and beautiful. It's your duty to be beautiful. Keep young and beautiful if you want to be loved.
You could go from doing a story about a savings bank going broke, serious story, threatening a lot of people and the bank, to jumping in a river to demonstrate that where this river met the sea, there was a dangerous rip, and that it was dangerous to children in summertime and to bathers. So the way you demonstrated that was on the principle of don't tell me, show me. The reporter jumps into the river, swims as hard as he can against the tide, and is seen to be going backwards.
Those are the days. But of course, nobody would ask you to do a thing like that these days.
There's a phrase in comedy which is pull back to reveal no trousers. And which is, you know, that you start the camera tight on someone's face and then you pull back to reveal the fact that they're standing naked in a bath of yogurt. And that was constantly used the whole time, and you knew it was coming.
As a Nationwide reporter, you had to be able to tackle anything from interviewing, say, Edward Heath, to some extraordinary animal.
Hey, are you the only... Hey, are you the only trained piglet in the world? Oh, you are.
Daft, really, and of course there's no program nowadays where that kind of thing could happen. I wonder if I could have your views on Tibet and the chances of its independence.
We always had animals on because the editors believed in what they call the ah factor. Ah, what a lovely dog. Ah, what a lovely baby. Ah, what a lovely this.
Darling, be a good girl. Oh, little limpy foot. Little limpy foot. Don't be too long about it. She does attempt to mate with me, and does actually have an animal orgasm, if that means anything to you. Does it?
Yeah, it does, except I don't know how you would detect it in a duck.
Oh, wouldn't you? Well, I
No.
can't explain that.
Daniel first started playing and winning at water skiing earlier this summer. In fact, after only a few weeks, with the help of his owner, 14-year-old Helen Rogers, he won the local water ski championships. Well, the dog section anyway.
The skateboarding duck was a duck that had actually learnt to operate and run up and down on the skateboard. It became a household name overnight. I mean, we had to keep on repeating this film and showing more and more and more about the duck. It was very funny to watch, and the duck actually was very clever. It became quite proficient, and it could actually turn the skateboard around. The other animal stories that we actually had on Nationwide were, for instance, Boozy the snail, who I suppose you can call the snail an animal, but he was reputed to drink a pint of beer.
That is an extraordinary sight. Does he get tipsy now? He's beginning to keel over now, I think.
I'll just make the beer a little bit frothy, because otherwise the snail might just fall in the glass.
Before he absolutely keels over and disgraces himself.
Can you see the mouth on the cat? He just had a little bit of froth.
He's
I'll put him down for some more.
Right on cue, live on the air before 10 million viewers, he crawled up the side of the glass, took a little sip of beer and fell over backwards dead. Now, I was very sorry for the snail, but at the same time I had to recognise the fact this did make brilliant television.
Embarrassing moments? I've got a classic here. Bob.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Jack.
Thank you very much indeed. Your turn next.
Oh, thanks very much.
Now, here we have a lady who's a High Court judge.
Yes.
So, how do I address her?
Well, male High Court judges in this country are knighted, and lady High Court judges have the title Dame conferred on them. So it would be, if you meet her socially, it would be Dame, whatever her Christian name is.
Yes.
On the bench, it would be Your Ladyship or My Lady or so.
I'm so sorry. I must apologise, actually, to our actors who've been standing here for a very long time under the lights. Do just stay there. Can we actually go past our poor judge? They have been very patient, standing on these hot lights for a very long time. We should have provided chairs. We didn't.
It was something that touched ordinary people's hearts. But it really had strong standards. It had standards of fairness, of objectivity, of journalism. And I'll tell you something else. It was a sort of strangely Reithian programme. You know, I would make a film about the woman in Banbury who'd been to 8,000 weddings because she went to a registry office herself, and it's a tear-jerking, wonderful story, and it would be followed by a 15-minute analysis that was done well directed about, you know, the problem of the dirty protest in Northern Ireland. Now, that's Reith.
If you think someone came down and just watched Nationwide and tried to get a picture of Britain in the 70s from watching Nationwide, they'd have this picture of this country which was populated entirely by mad vicars who liked railway trains, and people who dressed up in frocks, men who dressed up in frocks to go in front of cameras, and people who grew very large vegetables and skateboarded on top of nuns. And if you walk out the door afterwards, you wouldn't recognise the country at all. It's a complete fantasy. But it's a sort of conspiracy between everyone to believe that this is the truth about it.
Here we go. Another epic is launched. Over to you, Chris.
And I'm sure there's plenty of cream from the West Country. So watch the waistline of Frank.
Hurry up, Frank. You're going to be late.
Coming, darling. Sweet Bafalula, she's my baby.
Okay, everyone, have a nice time.
Bye, darling.
Don't keep those kids out too late. They've got school in the morning.
All right. Bye. To remind Stuart Hall and Mike Neville about the time we got past 3,000 people. Don't lose this one, Mike. Good luck, everybody. What in the momentum?
Thank you very much indeed. What a prince you are. And thank you very much for the cake. So from all of us, thank you and goodbye.
Hello, if you just joined us, you missed some interesting programmes. Between 3 and 4 o'clock, we had films from the Tonight programme and an untransmitted pile of Doctor Who, which was really fabulous. It's a pity you missed that. Between 5 and 7 o'clock, we had the cricket, which I'm not very interested in, unless it rains in big blobs like this till about 8 o'clock, and then it's quite a laugh to see them scampering off the pitch into the pavilion. Moving across here to the evening chart, coming up at 7-ish, you'll see What's My Quiz. I was in a quiz programme once. They asked me when it was going to rain. I got it wrong. We've got the Lime Grove documentary at 9. At 10 o'clock, it's quite a mess, which I remember being frightened by as a child, and that programme is going to terrify everyone down the western side of the country, except for people in Norfolk who are used to spooky things happening. That's all for now.
This is the BBC television service. And now Frank Muir introduces What's My Quiz?
Panel games. Probably